You look amazing.
Thank you. You too. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for making time.
Of course. Yeah, no, thank you for making time to talk to me. And it actually worked out perfectly because it's International Women's Day.
Yay.
So there isn't like a better way to spend this day than to talk to, another woman that is doing like a lot of amazing things out there and, in a male-dominated field.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like that's another episode, girl.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll have to have you on the podcast at some point and we can talk about feminist horror
Yeah.
all on its own.
Yeah.
Um, so today I'm with Tiffany Tony, with her, and we're going to be talking about her directional debut, for the movie Bora.
Yay. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So my first question for you is, what was it like, um, being the writer and director on your first film?
It's really interesting because I didn't really think about it at the time. It was just kind of like one of those things where I was like, I kind of got this spiritual download that told me, hey, if you want to be an actress, if you truly believe that you're a lead actress, you're going to have to greenlight yourself. And I was like, really? Like, that's a lot, you know? But I just kind of like started writing this story. It was me and two friends, China McCoy being one of them. And we decided that we were going to make this movie. At the time, it was like the pandemic was happening. We were all like living in cars and like couch surfing and had lost our jobs. And like all of the stability that we thought we had gone out the window. So we had decided we were going to just start like writing and like producing our own content. And this was like, I think the second project that we had started working on together. And I was like, hey guys, like I want to write this one. Like I'm feeling something. I'm feeling it. It feels really magical. Just give me a chance. And again, I was the only woman in this like creative collective, and they had never read any of my writing before. I didn't even know if I was capable of writing something that was like feature length and that would be good. And as
Yeah.
writing, it was just like these characters just came to life and they were telling me what they wanted to say. And it was like I just couldn't stop. Like I was like up at crazy hours. I just couldn't stop and it was just flowing. And that was when
Mhm.
like this is something special, you know? And initially I wasn't even supposed to direct this. One of my like male colleagues was supposed to direct it, but it just didn't work out. And initially, like, even though that was what it was supposed to be, I had to like make a bold choice and say, hey, you know what? Like, I'm the one funding this. I own this IP. It's not working out. And I had to like fire him, which was hard because he was my mentor. He was a man. He was older than me. He was more experienced than me. But like for this specific project, it just wasn't working out. So I was like,
Yeah.
and I had never directed a feature before. I didn't even know what that was or what that looked like. I just knew like, okay, we need A, B, C, and D, and we have to get from this point to that point. And how do we do that? You know? And so so just one step at a time, it was like it was a scary thing. It's honestly one of the scariest and most brave things that I think I've ever done. And I really didn't know what I was doing going into it, you know? Like I just knew that this was special and I knew that it had to get accomplished, and I knew that everybody involved would benefit from it if I was able to finish it somehow. So
That's
yeah.
amazing. That's super empowering. I know, especially if you have a kind of like an elder in the field
Yeah.
telling you certain things, but like that's not your vision, is
Yeah.
what it kind of sounds like. So you went with what, felt right for you. And that's awesome because especially as women, we're told to just,
Be quiet.
yeah, be quiet. I know better, so that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And don't get me wrong, like there are a lot of times I think men are necessary, you know, and they have their gifts. And there are a lot of times when they do truly like have a vision. People in general, men, women, have a vision. And it's like when your vision is like, if we're teammates and your vision is, it feels like this is right and this is your vision and you are like actively doing things that have proven that this is the right path, I'm submitting and I'm following you, whether you're male, female, trans, like I don't care where you come from. If this feels right and it's working and it's benefiting the greater good of the team, like I'm on board with that, you know. But this in this situation, that wasn't what was happening. And I
Yeah.
was forced to take a position of leadership that I didn't even ask for. You know, I didn't, but it was like that was what had to be done, you know? So
Hmm.
yeah. You're like,
Yeah. No, that I mean, yes, men have a place and they, but when it comes to especially a movie like this that is very like female centered with the
yeah,
roles, um, it this is your script. This is you wrote this.
yeah,
So you know how you want it to look.
for sure.
So, and that is a very scary thing to do that for the first time, especially. Had you ever directed like a short film before this?
Yeah, I had directed one in college, and then I like wrote and co-directed slash produced a short film called Jade Rising, and it won a few awards. And I was captain of my softball team, so I could do anything, right?
Yeah. No, you're a leader for sure. Like you have that quality already, and it shows with everything that you've done. So, and all the risks you've taken, and that's not easy to do.
Yeah, it definitely was scary at times. And it's weird because, like, as a woman, I'm sure as you can relate to, we operate on intuition a lot and like our gut feelings. And so, in business and like structured environments, a lot of people, it's very frowned upon. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was challenging when people are like, well, how do you know? Like, you've never done this before. And I'm like, well, I had a dream and there was symbols and signs. And they're just like, okay. That's my gift, you know? Like, that's my gift. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
But you also had previous experience that helped you and all these other things. You had
for,
a background with it and you didn't doubt yourself. So
yeah,
you knew that no matter what, you were going to persevere and that perseverance is so important for anyone to succeed in life. And yeah, so that's
yeah.
awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. What experiences helped you prepare for the role of director? So we already spoke briefly just now about like you had a short film before this, but is there anything else when it came to working with the cast
Yeah.
or getting them to portray a role the way that you wanted to, like when it comes to like directing other people's acting?
Well, it's interesting you ask. I wrote these roles for people that I already kind of knew. So for me, it was important that I wrote these characters based on people that I knew because I knew that would make them feel more comfortable. Like it would make them feel like they were just being like exaggerated versions of themselves already. And it would make it easier for me to kind of like guide them because like as I'm writing, I'm like, oh my gosh, what would Josh or Justin or Chris say in this situation? And it made me laugh. And I'm like, yeah, that's what he would say. And then I'm like, well, why don't I just call him to say it, you know? So that was kind of how I went about it because I wanted the characters to feel real. I wanted them to feel authentic and I wanted like people that watched it to feel like I know someone like that or that reminds me of my neighbor or my college roommate or the dude that used to sell weed down the street or just whatever it was. Like I wanted people to feel like they could relate to these characters. So I thought the best way to do that was to write in authentic voices of people that I knew. And then it also served the purpose of giving the people that I knew and cared about an opportunity to be a part of something that I knew was going to be special. So
That's
yeah.
amazing. So you already had like people in mind and everything. You already had your crew.
Yeah.
So that's super helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of the crew, it was literally me and two other people. Like we shot this movie with a crew of three. And one of the
Cool.
Ryan McCoy who helped me to co-direct when he was like my eyes when I couldn't like see myself, you know.
Hmm.
And then James Black, he is an amazing cinematographer, and both of them I know there were times when they thought I was absolutely crazy. And they were probably right. But just them like subscribing to this vision and like dedicating literally like a year and a half of their lives to just pouring into it. And the three of us, all of us were wearing like eight different hats, but we just
Hmm.
they were the people that I trusted, that I knew, like, okay, they get it. They understand the brand, they understand the tone, they understand these characters, they understand the camera angles, they understood like really what it was that I was going for. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's good. They shared your vision with you.
for sure. For sure.
So, how long did it take for you to write your script?
You know, every script that I've written is different. Some of them take a year, some of them take 2 years, some of them take 6 weeks. It just depends on like the motivation. Some stories I think you can kind of like get stuck. Like maybe you're just not sure where to go next, or you kind of like hit a writer's block. Um,
Hmm.
with this one, it was written in about 6 weeks, I would say. And like I told you earlier, it's because like the characters came to life in my head, and they were telling me what they wanted to say. You know,
Oh.
I didn't know how the story was going to end until I was ending it, you
Mhm.
know? And it was just a really special, like, spiritual thing. I cannot tell you, I'm trying to think outside of this script, I think the fastest that I've ever written a script has been like maybe 2 months or like 90 days. But this one was like within like a month and a half, I was like, all right, like I'm ready.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
yeah.
I mean, so where did you learn like how to formulate a script and with did you, because I saw that you went to school for theater or for
Yeah.
film.
My initial like studies were in journalism, and then I took theater like about halfway through studying journalism. I was like, I don't know if this is what I really want to do. So I started taking like theater classes and filmmaking classes, and started studying writing for TV and film. And then I also just had some really great mentors that would share their writing with me. They would let me read their scripts, and then like through my acting classes, I was also forced to read a lot of scripts. So I started learning like the format and the structure. I have this mentor named Preston Whitmore. He's a really amazing director. And he, to this day, like, first page, he'll be like, "This is shit," and he'll send it back to me. And he's very hard on me, but he's very honest and direct. And I think like having people in your life that read your work that are very honest and not just trying to like make you feel better about it, they actually like care about the work more than they care about what you think about what they think about the work. And so like I've had a lot of honest mentors, and that's been really a blessing to help me become a better writer. So yeah.
That's good to have those kinds of people surrounding you because,
Yeah.
constructive criticism, while criticism of any kind is hard to take,
For,
knowing that that person's intentions are there to better you
yeah.
is nice. And they're not just like there to talk shit and be
Yeah.
like, you suck. That's
Exactly.
not helpful.
Solution. So yeah. Yeah. For sure.
What lessons did you learn through this first film that this first feature-length film that you directed?
Oh my God, girl. So many. I don't even so many. I'll stick to like three. Uh
Okay.
I will say that the biggest lesson that I learned is that there aren't really any limits, you know, in terms of like who we are as individuals and our ability and like what we can create. Like, if you can envision it in your head, then you can manifest it to be real. And any limits that we have are limits that we have either created or that we have been like conditioned to believe or subscribed to. And I think there's something so powerful about the human imagination and the places that that can take us. And for me, I just learned like, okay, I'm limitless. And like, as long as I subscribe to that belief, then I can do anything. Like, we're just channeling anyway. So that was lesson number one. Lesson number two, I would say, is that Hollywood and the entertainment industry, because it's so ego based, it's like such a savage place. Like, people will just so quickly turn on you in ways that you don't expect. And so you have to like almost be prepared to say, like, I'm not going to think about if these people are going to hurt me or turn on me or try to like steal from me or cannibalize my relationships. Like, you're not really thinking about if, you kind of have to prepare for when it's going to happen. And just already go through the grief and the healing of that before it even does. And that's awful.
Yeah, no, that does not sound fun at all.
That's
And
the hard part of it, is just knowing that like everyone that you're working and partnering with is flawed, and they're going to have moments where it might make you feel disappointed, or you might make them feel disappointed, and just accepting people for who they are and understanding who they are and being able to like compartmentalize them and not have too great of expectations. And yeah, I think that was lesson number 2. Lesson number 3 is like everything should be in writing, even with your friends and people that you love. Like, just not so much because you're like worried they're going to screw you over, but more so that we both parties understand what's the agreement, what are the expectations, and that like if anybody gets confused, whether it's me or them, that we always have like a written document to go back to and say, no, like I know this was a year ago, but this was what we agreed on, and this is what we need to follow to make sure we stay on track. So like no deals on handshakes, just everything always needs to be written down. So yeah.
completely agree with that. Yeah, because I mean, you have to have clear expectations. No one will ever know what's going on in your brain unless you clearly just,
Map it.
it's like, yeah, until you are the one who lets them know. And you have to, that's all about communication, no matter if it's a partner, like if you're the director and it's your cast and crew, like communication is key and like everything.
For sure. And one lesson I will say, another one that was like really positive, is that like I feel that you can get a lot from people by giving.
Mhm.
For me, like I didn't have a huge budget for this. I was funding it myself. I was couch surfing for the first half of it and living in and out of my car for the first half of making this film until I was able to like find a place. Um,
Yeah.
but I still went out of my way to make sure that everybody involved had something, whether it be like a credit or gas money or food or some type of like compensation for what they were doing and for them showing up for me. Like I never wanted anyone to leave the project feeling like they didn't come away with it with something. And even if that meant that I didn't really eat that night or like have the best meal that night or whatever it was, like I always prioritized like making sure that my talent felt appreciated. Um, and it's hard to do that because you're dealing with so many different people and personalities, and you don't know what people's like love or gratitude languages are. So like just doing it in the best way that I knew how with whatever resources I had at the time. Like I always tried to make sure that people at least had something and that they knew that they were appreciated. Now whether they took it and valued my effort or not, like that was out of my control, but I always tried my best to like at least extend that olive branch. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's yeah, that's a super hard position to be in. And then it sounds like you are putting others' needs ahead of yours.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think people really understood that, which how could they if they've never like done that or made that type of sacrifice before? So I also had to
Mhm.
give them grace. Like if they didn't respond the way that I thought I would have in that situation, it's like, well, they don't really know because they're not in this position. So I just can't take it personal. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything you would do differently?
No. Well, I probably would have went a different route with the music the first time, but I can't even say that because the drama and trauma that I dealt with dealing with people in the music industry made me a better person, and it made me more like aware, and it made me more educated, and it connected me to some great musicians that I ended up working with down the line who are just really amazing people. So I can't say that. No, I wouldn't do anything differently. Yeah, all of it was for the greater good of like me and my evolution and the people involved and the communities that were brought together through this project. So, yeah,
Yeah. No, that's good because I mean, it's a learning process, right?
yeah,
Everything that we do, even if there's something that if there's ever a mistake, you learn from that and you grow from that.
for sure. For sure.
So,
And I'm glad that I made those mistakes and like poor judgment calls on like the level that I made them on, because I know like as we evolve, like there's less room for error. Like there's less margin for error. So I'm like, thank God that I got that out of the way, like thank God.
That's
So
a really good way of looking at it and thinking about it. And I think that if more people did that, they would grow and
yeah.
as people and individuals. And so that's awesome. So you had some pretty heavy dialogue in your film, and
Yeah.
it had to do with race and the difference between race and ethnicity.
Yeah.
So Elon
Mhm.
was, I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, but she was supposed to be Cuban,
Mhm. Mhm.
correct? And but she looks black.
Yeah.
So there was discussion between your character, and Elon about how, her ethnicity is Cuban, and that's
Yeah.
how she identified.
Mhm.
But she's perceived as black in
Yeah,
society.
for
And
sure.
you even made like a comment with the police, like you're going to be the one who gets shot or something.
Yeah.
Super brutal.
Yeah. Bora,
Um,
Bora holds no punches, pulls no punches.
yeah. Did that dialogue come from personal experience?
Absolutely. I think the lines can get really blurry when it comes to like nationality, ethnicity, and just all of our human genetics. And just based on my personal experience, I noticed that like Black people are really the only people that are forced to constantly like identify or explain what that even is. And it's like, even me on a day to day basis, people are like, well, what are you? And I'm like, I really just want to be like, I'm a woman, like, but I get what they're asking and I get why. And I also don't think that most times it's not coming from a negative place. It's really people just curious, like they're just asking, but because of all of the trauma and drama that's happening in our society right now, it's a very sensitive subject and it's hard for people to ask those questions. And it's hard for people who may genuinely just want to know to even like have those conversations with other people that they're just trying to get to know and they just want to know more about the culture. And they're like, well, how do I ask without coming off racist? Or maybe I am racist and I didn't even know I was racist. Or maybe I'm ashamed of my own culture and ethnicity because society has made me feel so ashamed of it, like society constantly associating blackness with poverty when like we're not really considering all of the things that happened that led us to that point, like colonialism, for example.
Yeah.
So it's like all of those things I think play a part in like not only who I am, but also what I've witnessed. My father, who's a very dark skinned man who, looks African, but he grew up in Memphis, like, so it's like just witnessing these things and like how he's treated, especially when it comes to law enforcement, but compared to how I'm treated and understanding that I had sort of this light skin privilege
Mhm.
because of my proximity to whiteness.
Yeah.
And when I understood that, I was like, okay, like I could take this privilege and just go on about my day, or I could like use my position to like create a safe space for people to have these conversations and
Yeah.
about it and for people to be educated and for people to feel seen. And so that was really why I did that. And I didn't even know like why I was doing it at the time. Like it just kind of was coming out and I was like, "Oh my God, like why is all this coming out of me through these characters?" And it wasn't until I watched girl, it wasn't until I watched the movie that I was like, like I
Yeah.
was like, dang, like we've all like women, people of color, like men of color, like we've all been through so much. And it's like life is happening so fast that we don't even get a moment to ask ourselves how we feel about it or like why certain things affect us or why is the word black so triggering, like to people who are in black skin. And there's a lot of reasons, but it just was one of those things that I felt like we all needed a safe space to be able to have that conversation. And like had the film not had that in it, like you and I wouldn't even be in this safe space talking about it. And so
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that, like yeah.
Yeah. So
So
your main character, Elon, she's supposed to be Cuban.
yeah.
And it's, well, so I'm Hispanic, but you would never know. I look very white. I'm very, very white passing. But my
Like in terms of your social interactions.
well, my I have two step siblings that are both Cuban. And they are both light-skinned, blonde hair, basically, with
Yeah.
like blue eyes.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, like people won't see them as Cuban either
Yeah.
because they're so light-skinned and the blue eyes and all that stuff. But I think people just we like to typecast when it comes to race and ethnicity and um
Such a big thing, especially in communities of color. Like, there's a lot of like even in Mexico, like in Acapulco, like the Mexican people from those places are like me, like they look like me. And so, but
yeah,
the closer you are to like looking like a Spaniard, sort of the more privileges you have within society. So I think that colorism exists like not only in Latin communities, but also in Black communities. And like if you go to Thai, I mean, it's everywhere. So it's like
yeah,
wanted to like acknowledge that in the film, and I wanted people to kind of be a little bit triggered by the fact that like, okay, Elon is this Black woman who identifies as Cuban, but does she have one Cuban parent, like, or is she identifying as Cuban because she doesn't want to associate with Blackness because of the trauma and like prejudice that comes with that? Like there's a lot of like layers to it, and I
yeah,
wanted feel like how you feel like, wait, well, why is that? What is that? Well, let's unpack that. So
yeah.
I'm glad that you like saw that. Yeah. And that you remembered it.
Yeah, no, it was a really meaningful part to me, just because of my experiences with my family. Like, my mom's 100% Puerto Rican. And so she's always been treated very differently than me. And
Yeah,
I have uncles that are very dark-skinned that people won't even realize that they're Puerto Rican. They just label them as being Black. And you would never, if you put the two of us together, you wouldn't even think that we're family members. Like, but that's my uncle.
right.
Um,
Do
but
people ever have experiences where people will like say negative things about Black people or dark skinned people, not knowing that you are of the same culture? Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's definitely very triggering when it's like, well, it's like you just don't realize who I am. And I get very quiet when that happens. And it happened a lot growing up. And it was it just made me feel very uncomfortable. But I also knew like these people don't realize like where I come from, what my background is and things like that.
For sure.
So,
I mean, it's happened to me too, where like people will say negative things about like Mexican or indigenous people, not knowing like that I have ancestors from, and I'm just like, first of all, why do you feel so comfortable saying anything that stems from bigotry around me at all, like ever, but it's, I think everyone's just looking for allies, even in their ignorance. So,
mhm.
like it
Yeah.
happens. But I
Yeah.
hope that when people watch this, that they will feel somewhat educated, and even if they don't feel educated, that they will be curious enough to accidentally end up down a rabbit hole that accidentally educates them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. No, I think it's important to whenever I saw Bora as really wanting to embrace her like the ethnicity and her race and be a representative of the Black community. And I saw her as wanting Elon to also be that.
yeah.
Is that like how you wanted it to be portrayed?
Not necessarily. I think I just wanted to create a safe space for people to decide what those characters meant for them. I wanted to bridge a gap culturally, especially between Black and Brown communities, because I think we have so much in common, like the way we dance, the way we love, the way we season our food. Like we have more in common than our differences. And I grew up, in a space where like I felt very seen by Mexican people, always seen, loved, supported, grew up in a home that was very like culturally diverse. I was born in Hawaii. My mom was born in Guam and grew up in Hawaii, but she's like a Black woman with like indigenous roots, you know? So it was like, I never really thought about the difference between culture, nationality, genetics, race. I never thought about those things until I left my home, and everybody outside of my home was forcing me to try to pick a box or pick a, and I'm like, no, I'm all of that though. Like I'm all of it. I'm all of
Yeah.
it. Why are you just because you can't digest that I'm all of it, that's not my problem. You know what I mean? So it was like one of those things where I wanted to showcase a lot of different cultures in one project, cinematically, musically, and with like just showing these people interacting with each other in a way that was non-violent, but it escalated to violence because that's just human nature, you know? So yeah, I wanted to showcase a world where like everybody was everybody. And Bora was focused on who are the bad people. She didn't care about, if you were a bad man and you were Black, she was going to kill you. If you were a bad man and you were white, you had to die. If you were a bad man and you were Latino, she was going to kill you. Like it didn't
Yeah.
about like, are you ethical or are you not, you know? And in her own twisted Dexter type mentality, you know? So
Yeah, her own rules when it
yeah,
came to ethics and what was moral and amoral and all of that.
yeah, for sure.
So would you say that you're more like Elon then in your script?
Oh, I was 100% like Elon when I moved out of my parents' house. 100%. 100%. And then I transitioned and I was a lot like Bora. And then I had to find the middle ground and like the balance because you can't be too much of either one, I think. I think all of us, when we leave the house, we get to decide like, do we want to be Elon or do we want to be Bora today? Or how are we going to find that middle ground of like being balanced, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah.
It's funny because like whenever you're speaking and you're talking about your family dynamics and how strong they were and supportive of you, they were, that's amazing. And for any family. But that's really great that they wanted to give you these experiences and they did everything they could and had to. Um,
Yeah.
it's and then the way that you saw that you were perceived once you left that base.
Yeah. It was
I
very,
kind of, huh,
actually, it was very,
sorry.
oh no, I was just saying like it was very hurtful when I stepped out into the world and realized how people perceived me.
Yeah.
E- Even my own, even people that looked like me perceived me as something completely opposite than I was. And
Hmm.
people too, you know,
Yeah.
with the education and the experience that I've had as a person who experienced poverty, but also experienced a high level of education and world travel, I now have a responsibility to like mend these relationships and bridge these gaps creatively. So I feel like this movie was the start of that, you know?
That's
Like,
awesome. And I
yeah.
hope you can continue down this path of like, um, you know, kind of grappling with these issues when it comes to race and ethnicity, because I don't think, we like to whitewash it and say, like, people who say, like, I don't see color. Yes, you do.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
not colorblind.
It's okay that we do. It's okay that we see it. It's just a
It's
matter
important that we see it.
because
I
if
think
we
it,
then we diminish like people's experiences and cultural perspectives. So,
yes.
yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So you worked with some pretty big names. You got Omar Gooding in Bora,
Yeah.
and you also got Noel, how do you say his name?
We just call him Noel G.
He's super recognizable. Like
Yeah.
I've definitely seen him in other things. What was it like getting them to buy into your film and work with you?
So funny you ask. So with Omar, they're two completely different stories. I had worked with Noel G before in a movie called Lazarus that my friend actually, his name is Sean Riggs, and he basically pulled a Bora. Like he lived in his car and like, you know, did a lot of things to get his movie made called Lazarus. And I was a production assistant on that movie and I acted in it. And so I got to watch him like basically do what I did. And so when I saw him like doing this, I'm like, wow, like that's inspiring. Like he's just this one guy and he's pulled all these pieces together and all this money and resources together to make his dream come true of being an actor, you know? And I watched him do that. And Noel was in that movie. And Noel and I, our encounters were very brief. Like, I don't even think he remembered me. But a few years later, when I was making Bora, I reached out to him on Instagram and I was just like, hey, like, I'm making this movie. You and I were in Lazarus together. You probably don't remember me, but here's like a little clip. I had put together kind of like a rough cut of a trailer, and I was like, I
Mhm.
want you to be in it. And he was like, well, you know, all of my bookings go through my management, but just know that I really want to do it and I'll work with you. So I reached out to his management. We were able to work some things out to where I only had him for one day though. So I honestly like wrote that role for him, just hoping and praying he would say yes, you know? And so same with Omar, like, there was a director that kind of like owed me a favor for something. And he was like, however, I can make it up to you. And I was like, well, saw that you work with Omar. And if you could get him to read my script, like, you know, that would be great. So he's like, well, he's not going to read the whole script. He's busy. But if you could just send him the scene that you want him to be in, great. I did not have a scene. There was no scene for him. So with the day he said it, I literally wrote the scene that day. That liquor store scene was not in the original script. I wrote it for him and for the guys who had the lowriders. Shout out to Hoopty. They always pull up for me. They're a Mexican lowrider club in LA, and they are just the most phenomenal people. They always support me. They always support each other. They're building from the ground up. They're just like great, hardworking people. And so that scene was written for them and for Omar. And
Yeah.
he told me what the price was for him for a day. Girl, I'm not going to even say what it was, but just know that I did not have it and that I literally manifested it within a week.
I really liked Omar Gooding's scene
Thank
whenever at the gas station. I thought it was great that like there's the kid, they're all like it's like the water and they're like, we don't have to pay for this. Water is a human right, and they're all taking the water. I thought that was very funny. And then when he like the last guy who's leaving,
you. Yeah.
did he actually pull out a gun? I can't remember.
Yes, because I wanted people to understand like that's how valuable water is. Like, you know, and it was like kind of just it was comedic relief as well, but
Yeah.
like yeah.
It
Yeah.
was, but it was also, I felt like it was emphasis on like people have basic needs that are not being met.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I really liked how his line where he's like, well, I'm gonna call your mom.
Yeah.
Because that's definitely something where if you're in these small communities and like I was raised in like Section 8 housing and kind of like more, I was in more like ghetto, what perceived as ghetto. Um, and that's a lot of the times, like everyone knew each other. And it's like, oh, your cousin just did this, and they just call the mom and
Yeah.
like, go get your cousin, go get your sister, go get your brother. And that's how you dealt with that shit. You didn't call the police,
Mhm.
you called the family members and you guys set each other straight because you knew that if you were going to call the cops
Somebody could get hurt or die.
for something so stupid.
Exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure. For sure. I knew Bora had to be the one to open that door, though. Like, she had to be sexy, she had to be funny, she had to entice people into listening to these issues. There was no way we're just gonna, like, you know, be told to, like, believe this way or maybe you should think different. Like, no, they needed to be enticed into it and it needed to be their choice, you know?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so I'm a horror podcast. And when I first started looking into your movie, I was like, and I like watching through it, like I was like, this is more like a crime movie.
Mhm.
It felt like that in the beginning, but then it has like a twist ending, and it definitely is a horror film.
Yeah.
But it's labeled as a thriller as well.
Yeah.
But most thrillers are horror.
Yeah.
Why is it labeled as a thriller instead of a horror movie?
That's a really good question. Me myself, I really didn't even know how to classify it because I felt like it was sort of like a genre all its own. Like there were so many rules that were broken in this film. There were so many things I did that were just like, non-traditional, and like just so many filmmaking rules were broken, and it crosses over into, I think, both, like it starts out as a thriller and then it crosses into a horror. So I didn't really know how to categorize it, honestly. Like when I was working with distribution, they were just like, we'll call it a thriller, but I didn't even know if that was really the right way to go about it. I wasn't really sure how it should be classified, and sometimes we call it a horror film, sometimes I refer to it as a thriller, but I definitely think it's both. It
Yeah.
has the core elements of both. Um,
Hmm.
but I agree with you, like the ending kind of like shifts it into that direction. So yeah, it wasn't really being that it was my first time, um, and that as I was writing this, I didn't even know how it was going to end until I was writing it. Like it was like a download. So yeah,
Yeah.
actually it was supposed to just be a thriller, but then it just got crazy and I couldn't stop.
Yeah. No, it was really great. I thought the ending was great. I thought it really kind of pulls it all together at the end, and you, uh, it makes a statement for sure.
Thank you.
So I don't want to give anything away, like no spoilers here, but I'll just say that it definitely makes a statement, and it's a really good twist ending.
Thank you. It's been really interesting hearing your perspective of the film too, because you and I come from um, different places in terms of how we're perceived by society. But ironically, I think culturally we probably have a lot more in common than we realize. But it's great to hear, what you took from the film. And I just appreciate you making time to watch it. I know independent films, like when you sit down to watch one, you don't know what you're going to get. And especially when it comes to quality and storytelling and acting and all of those things, it's kind of a risk. So I'm just grateful that you made the time, you know.
Well, I'm grateful that you're out there doing your thing, and it's very inspiring.
Thank
And
you.
I think that you are going to definitely inspire other Black women and Indigenous women
Thank
in
you.
the field, and to show them that you can do this.
I
And yeah, it's important. I
yeah,
think this is something that's important to
yeah,
highlight, and your accomplishments are definitely worth like noting and talking about. And especially like, no offense, men or white people, but if I have a chance to highlight something that is women directed, and especially something of people of color, it's important to use my
perfect.
white passing self to help drive that attention to
Thank
it.
Thank you. And it's really great. I think this film has resonated with people like that come from so many different backgrounds. There was a woman from Scotland, I think, an older white Scottish woman who left a review on like YouTube and was like, I love this movie called Bora. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, like she was impacted. And that was when I felt like, okay, I'm doing something right. Cause like no matter where people come from and how they identify, like ethnically or culturally, like it's hitting points for them. And for me, that was important because I want to create pieces that do bring everybody under one roof to ask questions and to have these types of conversations. So that was really cool. Like I was like, okay.
Oh, so we already you said like Andre McCoy was kind of like your eyes when you were being the one filming, or
Yeah,
you were being the actress.
absolutely. Like China McCoy he worked on the Matrix films. He worked on Mortal Kombat. He's done
Wow.
like anyone in the industry that you can think of, he's worked with them. And he kind of grew up with a rough background. Like he grew up in Baltimore. And so like his energy can come off very imposing. And a lot of times people prejudge him or misjudge him without getting to know him. And they don't understand the creative genius that's sitting in front of them and how lucky they are. Like he understands composition, he understands tone, he understands things that I didn't even understand until I knew him. And a lot of my creativity is because of like what I've learned from him. Like I mean, I've always been a highly creative and intuitive person, but he's been one of the biggest influences and mentors in my journey. And so like I said, he's rough around the edges, but if people can just like get past their own like stereotypes of like what he is on the surface, like physically, and understand his mind, like he's a genius. Like he's a genius, and I'm so blessed to have him to call and like consult with on things. Like he's really brilliant. And so having his like energy around, or even just him to call and say, hey, like, do you think this shot should go in the trailer or this one? And he'd be like, which one looks more expensive? And I'm like, that one. And he's like, exactly. And like, he just gets it. And because
Yeah.
now I get it, so
Yeah.
he's such a blessing.
So I didn't realize that Day of the Dead lasted 2 days until I Googled it because the film goes from Day of the Dead and like they're I don't even know if they don't even go to sleep. They just like go into the next day, the next morning, but it's still Day of the Dead. And I was like, oh, like, is it that long? But it is. I don't celebrate Day of the Dead. Is this something like, is Day of the Dead something that you are familiar with and you've celebrated?
I celebrated it like once or twice. My Aunt Lydia, she lives in Texas and she like is a hardworking indigenous Mexican woman who is so proud of her culture. And I remember like her sister's children like passed away in Mexico and she like brought them from Mexico to the States when we were kids and they didn't speak any English at all. They only spoke Spanish. And so we were the same age. And so I was at their house every weekend and working to try to like create our own language between English and Spanish because I wasn't fluent in Spanish yet and they weren't fluent in English. And so we were like kind of creating our own language. They were teaching me, I was teaching them. And that was when I started like becoming more aware of Day of the Dead, was just like being with her, being at her house and like celebrating it. And she kind of like helped me to get over my fear of dying, my fear of death, because she was just like, our ancestors are always with us. And one day, you'll be an ancestor too, and you'll be able to guide, you know, the people that we left behind. And I was like, that's really like a beautiful way of kind of like looking at it. She kind of helped me reshape my perspective of death. And so that was kind of why it was significant to me. And I also saw it as an opportunity to kind of like teach people and like how it caused you to kind of look into it, like a lot of people did, especially Black people who don't celebrate those sort of holidays. Like they kind of started wondering, well, what is Day of the Dead? Well, let me look into it. And so we had the opportunity to bridge that cultural gap, which was important to me. Um,
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize what Day of the Dead is actually about. They just, you've got the skull, like the sugar skull type look, and it's all very pretty.
yeah,
And there's like lots of bright colors, and it's, you know, people who like more morbid things will be attracted to it, not realizing the importance of this tradition, like for people, for like the Mexican culture specifically, and how, like where it originated from and how intertwined it is with their spirituality
for sure.
things. It's not just,
A fun
uh,
It is fun, but it's also like, again, I think it's like it is a spiritual thing, and it helps. I think if you can sort of embrace it, like you get to take on a different perspective of death, which you know is necessary in a world like this. I think.
yeah.
So,
And it's important to understand each other's traditions and holidays and where they actually, not just at face value.
yeah, for sure.
So, um,
Thank you for that.
so yeah, of course.
Yeah, I am working on a second one. The script is being written now, so yes.
Well, I look forward to seeing that. Is it also based off of Day of the Dead and like is it kind of playing off of Bora?
Yeah, yes. I don't want to say too much, but yeah, yeah. It connects some of the dots and some of the stories of the other characters in the first one. So, yeah. hmm
Well, I look forward to that. Um, so why did you choose Bora as the title of your film?
I didn't really use it. It was like, as I was writing, I was like, what is this character's name? And she told me what her name was. I know that sounds really witchy, but she did. She told me. She said, my name is Bora. I'm Bora. Like she told me, and it was a download. And I was like, that's the title. Like, because I didn't know what I would call it. I don't remember what the if there was even a like temporary title. It was just like I just knew. Like she just told me. I didn't even know what Bora meant until after she told me that was what she was called. And then I started researching it because people were asking me, why'd you pick that name? And I'm like, I don't know, it was a download. And then I started researching, well, maybe there's some spiritual significance here. And like there were a lot of things I found that were interesting, but that wasn't until after I had already named the film. So this whole thing was very spiritual, and I think it was therapeutic too. It was healing because I had been through a lot of trauma with just like bad men, just with bad intentions, and me being naive and a good hearted person in a world like this. It was like I had to channel it somehow, like and to call people out without saying their names. It was like, you know who you are. If you're the guy that roofies girls at parties, like you should feel convicted by this. If you're the guy that uses your power to get women to do things when you have no intention on like genuinely helping them, or if you're a man who weaponizes your power to oppress women, if you're a man who like all of those things needed to be called out, especially in an industry like this. And
Yeah.
you know so yeah, so I felt like it was time.
So
And this,
those were all the characters that you were killing off.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought Bora was a very powerful character. She definitely had a lot of like, we had already talked about, she had like her moral code.
Yeah,
She talked about who deserved it and who didn't deserve it.
right.
Um, and so when I looked up Bora, like it definitely sounds like a Hispanic word and name. Um, and I guess it's Portuguese. It's like a Portuguese word.
I didn't even
Um,
teach me.
huh?
I said, you're teaching me. I didn't even know that.
That's whenever I looked it up, like in Portuguese, it means to leave somewhere or to go somewhere. And you definitely go to a lot of different places in this film. Yeah, because I think like it was meant to be in a poverty-stricken part,
Mhm.
correct?
Well, because Elon came from a life of somewhat privilege in a way, not
Mhm.
like she, even though she came from privilege on paper, like from an economic sense, she still was facing oppression and racism and could not escape that no matter what hood or neighborhood or city she was in. And that was what I wanted people to really digest. And Bora taking her into these spaces and showing her, oh yeah, you think life is easy? Let me show you. Let me show
Yeah.
and so yeah, it was two women that both identified culturally in one way, but like lived in two completely different realities, which speaks to what you said earlier about like you can't just assume that two people that look the same have the same experiences or belief systems, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
What are you working on next? Like, is there anything people should be looking out for? I know that you were in some more films recently. You were in a film last year. I'm trying to find what it was called.
Okay.
Sorry.
The influencer.
Yes, The
So,
Influencer, and then you were just recently in the movie Exotic that came out this year.
yes. Yeah, so the influencer, I play a very interesting character. I'm not going to go into details. I play a bad guy, a bad gal in that, and it's on AMC Plus, I believe. It's on All Black Network and it's on Amazon Prime as well. But it's an All Black and AMC production. um, I got a chance to play one of the main characters in that. That was a lot of fun. There's also Exotic, which is coming out on Amazon Prime in a couple of weeks. It was directed and written by a guy named Segrid Phillips, who he's a black man whose father was Dominican. And so he has a lot of like interesting crossover and intersection in terms of culture as well. And like this movie really like bridges gaps culturally too, like in this kind of in a similar way Bora did, but it's like a modern day Scarface. And I play this Afro Latina journalist from New York in it who goes to Miami to investigate some shady activity. But it's really cool. It has like a lot of amazing exotic cars in it. I got to act alongside this guy named Peter Pera, who is very talented. He's kind of new to acting, but I think he did a really great job in this movie. Um, and we actually have a premiere coming up for it in Atlanta on the 22nd of this month. Yeah, so Exotic is definitely coming out soon. And then I was in a movie called Beneath the Shadows that's supposed to be on BET this summer. I don't know where they are at in post production with it, but I'm the lead in that as well. It's directed by a guy named Justin Kuhn, and he's honestly one of my favorite people that I've ever worked with. He's such a great director, and I hope that I get to work with him again in the future. He's so talented, like just edgy, breaks the rules, but still knows the rules type of guy, you know? Like he's
Yeah.
so I got to work with him. And then I recently just had a call with the female director um, on this project. It's a thriller. I can't talk too much about it because it's not even like we haven't even started shooting yet, but I'm supposed to start filming that in May here in LA. So
Amazing.
yeah, yeah. And I wrote another movie that I'm going to be shooting this summer as well. Can't talk about that yet either, but yeah. So at least I'm in at least 3 films that are shooting this summer, and I'm in at least 3 films that are coming out this year. So yeah.
That's amazing. You have a lot of things going on. You're definitely a very busy woman. I think you'll be a huge inspiration to other women in the field and girls, little girls who want to be directors and actresses and producers and all the other things.
Thank I really hope so. I hope more than anything that it just encourages people, like all people, like no matter their gender or race or religion or where they come from, that like the only way to really understand your own limits is to push past them. And like in order to have the life of your dreams, or even like just to cross off things on your bucket list, you have to take risks, and not everybody's going to understand those risks. Not everybody's going to understand your purpose or like the downloads that you're getting from however you perceive the creator to be. Like,
Mhm.
not everybody's going to understand that, but you have to move anyway and know that, like, at the end of the day, it's just you. Like, nobody else's opinion even matters, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they like a lot of times we're so worried about what other people think, but honestly, like people don't even think about us. Like
Yeah.
we're the ones thinking about how they're thinking about us.
Yeah.
And really, we need to think about how you think about yourself
A
and
hundred.
how you want to be perceived.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Don't let other people create your narrative.
100%. 100%. I choose me all the
Yeah,
time, or who else doesn't. I do. So, yeah.
perfect.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for meeting with me. I'm so glad I got to meet you. And yeah, I will hopefully we'll cross paths in the future.